Hey, Tim. Part two, setting the scene for this one and diving right into it right away. I've seen you write this quote that successful experimentation is cultivated, not designed or manufactured. And I think you speak about that really relatively in the whole kind of context of the kind of culture of experimentation. And particularly, I've seen you write some like pretty cool stuff around where people make mistakes here. What does that look like? How can people kind of think about that in their orgs?
For sure. So I think to put it in like a sentence, it's remember trying to figure out as a person who's trying to build adoption for experimentation or really any type of organizational change, you have to ask yourself, are you on the soapbox or are you driving the bus? The big difference is how, I would say, how sustainable the adoption you get is when it's one or the other. So, being on a soapbox, I think, is what most of us gravitate toward when we're trying to help others understand the value of experimentation, help them realize, hey, experimentation is simply rocket fuel for your product development process. And I think the challenge that we come across is that we fall victim to our instinct. Because if we see someone doing something the wrong way, what is your instinct? It's to correct them. It's to say, "Hey, you're doing that wrong." Like, there's a better way to do it. Let me show you. And when we're working with people who are in a product organization, marketing organization, and they have a certain way of doing things, so many people will say, "Yeah, I'm very open-minded. I'm open to learning. I want to know how to do it better." But when we approach those individuals by starting with, hey, you're doing this wrong, then our natural instinct as human beings is to defend ourselves, is to say, hold on,
Totally.
like you're telling me I'm doing something wrong. My natural instinct is to push back, and I'm not going to be as receptive to whatever you have to say next. There are a few individuals out there who love hearing that and get excited for it, but that's far and few between. When you're trying to expand a culture of any kind, in this case of experimentation or a growth mindset, it's important to spend less time pointing out all the things they're doing wrong. Hey, you're investing in features before you validated them. Hey, you're running tests just from gut feeling experiments, so on and so forth. And that is true, right? In a lot of cases, like it's not like they're wrong, but if we're trying to get those people to adopt the approach we're trying to take, it's not going to be as sustainable because you're starting off by almost like shaming them. And again, this expands well beyond just experimentation. This is very much any type of change that you're trying to influence anywhere. Um, and so, what I recommend, and it's so funny because I'm saying you're doing it wrong. This is how we're doing it wrong. But I'm trying to kind of open our eyes here to what is the right way to do it. And so, really, from my experience, when trying to help others see the value of experimentation, I pretty much phrase it as take them on the bus ride. There's a book, Trillion Dollar Coach, that talks about Bill Campbell, who was a success. He was a coach and became a very successful executive coach. He was a football coach, turned into executive coach. You know, people like Google, Meta, Facebook. He was their coach. And one thing that he preaches when trying to explain how to get people to adopt or change or trust the new process you're trying to bring is to bring them on the bus ride versus trying to just tell them what to do. And this is exactly what it sounds like. So when I'll use the example at Minecraft, right? So when I started, PMs, product teams, they had no idea when to experiment. When they did experiment, they had no idea what to do with the results. This went up, this went down. And because of that, they implemented very few of their experiments. I spent 3 months with these teams going through the entire product lifecycle, specifically leveraging the tools of experimentation within each one with them. I wasn't telling them this is what you have to do, go do it. I was actually doing it for them, but bringing them along. So I'd perform some user research, but before that, I'd talk to them. What's your research questions? What do you want to learn about your users that you don't know? So this is like discovery for product. Then I would go actually execute the research, and then I bring them right back in. Here's everything we learned. Here are all the problems people are having. I'd pull up the website. I'd actually walk them through the things that were pointed out. I'd show them video recording snapshots. Not don't make them watch every recording, not yet. And then I would stop there. I would pause there. I wouldn't say based on this, this is what we should do. I would just say this is everything we learned. And then I would give them time to digest. Like, because whenever you bring user insights into the conversation, you just see it click. Like, you just see the wheels start turning of solutions coming into the minds of these product owners, these product developers, designers. And then I would try to meet with them again to isolate the solution conversation. Because, like, with experimentation, you go through pretty much observation, then you go through theory, like create your theories based on your observations, then you go to the test. So I try to isolate those three areas because if you're in observation and you start coming up with theories before you've gotten the full story, you're going to have some dilution. Like it's going to be diluted. You're not going to have ideas that are coming from very thought through comprehensive problems. They're going to be like off the cuff, very impulsive almost. So I purposely space these out. And so going from this is what we learned to here's, now let's talk about solutions. What could we do to solve this? And within that conversation, tying it to their goals, right? I'm like, okay, we're going to talk solutions, but I want to just put your OKRs up here for us to start. Because again, like with CRO, with experimentation, when you're trying to take them through the journey, it's so easy for them to be like, what if we just change the button copy? What if we just change the color? What if, things that maybe are just like low hanging fruit, but they're not necessarily targeting the strategy. So at this point, it's like, hey, take the thing they care about the most. So they realize experimentation is not a side gig. It is made to influence whatever their biggest goals are, in this case, their OKRs. So that's when you get into solutioning with them. You go through that. And then from there, it's okay, let's prioritize these and let's go run some tests. And so, same thing, like we're executing, but we're bringing them along for all of the major decisions and major learnings. And then you get to running the test, analyzing the test. You do the same things. So you go through the data of the test results with them. You ask them for theories. You give your theories. Then you get to recommendations. And then they go build it or they go implement it. And if you bring them through this, through enough tests, right? Like I said, 3 months for the Minecraft team. That's when you get to a point where you have PMs. So one PM I work with who was one of the biggest, I would say, like she really wanted to use experimentation more. She just had no idea how. But by the end of that 3 months, she said, Tim, I will never launch another feature without doing it as an A/B test ever again. Bringing them on the bus ride, it is more work. The soapbox
Totally.
Soapbox is the shortcut, and you have very few people who, from a natural learning process, who are going to sustainably adopt when you're on the soapbox. I still find myself on the soapbox all the time. Like, I have to pull myself
Yeah,
back.
yeah, totally. We're guilty of it too, I think, as well. So
Yeah,
yeah, right there with you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it just goes to this philosophy of like, if you spend most of your effort and attention on like hating on the things that everyone's doing wrong versus you know taking data and presenting it to them in a very objective way and then explaining here's a way we can do it better, right? It's like night and day as far as the type of adoption you get. I mean, I go as far as even saying like right now for the entire studio for Minecraft, my goal is to help all teams adopt experimentation in the proper way. I go as far as telling people, hey, here's what we can do. Here's some data to show how we've helped other teams do this. And here's some potential opportunities we can achieve with you. But if you're not interested in this, that's totally fine. Like if you feel like, hey, this is not really going to help, this is completely your decision. The harder you push, it's like like cause and effect. The harder you push, the harder they're going to push back. And this is especially true as you go up the ladder. Like leaders, they believe, and I believe the same thing, but their perception is my professional opinion and business intuition is what I get paid for. So if we go to them and say, you're doing it wrong, or we go to them and say, you're making all the feature decisions, but we think you should not make all the feature decisions, and you should look at an experimentation program to help use data to help you make those decisions, it's not going to be received very well with the soapbox method. Taking them on the bus ride saying, "Hey, look what your team did," or "Look at what this other team did. Hey, would you be interested in, trying this out? No pressure." You're going to see much more enthusiasm, right? You're just giving them exactly what they want in the larger scope. Give me information or data that's going to help me make better decisions, and then let me make that decision myself. And so I've seen such stronger adoption with this bus ride approach versus the soapbox approach.
You love it, by the way, and I think the idea also, I love just the simplicity of like giving the agency of like, if you want to try it, please give it a try, but not pushing. I think that's so huge, and kind of like avoiding some level of reactance where someone says you're pushing too hard, I'm being persuaded, versus how do we let them gently step into it and then create the right environment where they start almost getting the hook and kind of going from there. I think if you're like a team of one or you're just starting this, everything you're describing is like very easy, right? Like one person can actually go and do that like observation, do some research, go through analytics, come up with a session that hopefully, if they don't have to do too much persuasion, just come and learn, I think is like reasonable to get people's time. But if someone's been on the soapbox, which I think lots of people could be guilty of this, like I often hear people like, I want to build a culture of experimentation in my company. They've maybe been on the soapbox for a long time. Like, can they pivot? Like, can they switch to that? And like, what would be, is there anything like kind of tangible that you can think of? And I think it's pretty cool, like asking you this, because in Minecraft, I think you already had a lot of knowledge of other places in Microsoft. So you've almost stepped in a new role, and then maybe there's a natural opportunity to make that pivot. But if you were kind of in Minecraft for a long time and you had to change minds, what would be an easy way that someone could do it in terms of like, hey, how do I shift this philosophy of what I'm doing that then's going to shift the potential of the culture at the later moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is why the first impression is so important. If you've already been on the soapbox and you've made enemies like within within the organization, you've got an uphill battle. And I think the best way in Ron Kohavi's book, um, I'm looking at the title because I always screw the title.
You're
Trustworthy
good, yeah.
online controlled experiments. He talks about this approach.
It's a good thing you did it, because I would have said trustworthy experiments is the first thing I think
Yeah,
of. So
you
that's
you only
exactly
got the you
exactly
only got the
right. Yeah.
big letters. You got to get the little letters too. Um,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
he talks about this almost cycle that you have to go through. And I think if you've been on the soapbox and you've already had pushback, then what you have to do is almost create a sense of FOMO. And you do this in an incredibly objective way. You have to really shift from, I have a strong opinion and I need other people to adopt my opinion. You have to shift from that to, I have some really compelling data and I want to help other people become aware of this data. And then I can provide recommendations, I can provide help if they want it, but that's where the buck stops. It's not, I have data, I want to show people the data, and I want them to do what I want them to do because of it. You have to trust that these people are smart enough to understand the information that you're providing them is an opportunity for them and their team. And so, what the book talks about is you essentially have to continue to chip away by showing test results, showing research results. And then as you gather more data on a cumulative level for a team, you can start showing the operational data. They ran this many experiments, they had this win rate, they had this average lift per win, average revenue win lift per win, average, retention lift per win. And this was the cumulative impact they had for the whole quarter or the whole year. And how did they do this? They did this by adopting these particular practices and doing road shows to teams, leaders, finding people who are advocates already. So you're on the soapbox, you likely have some type of advocates, because if you're on the soapbox alone in an organization, you might not be there that long. And so really leaning into advocates and asking them to also like share out, like go down this approach of just share the data, understand what are the goals of these people who I still need to influence. And if I don't understand their goals very clearly, what are their boss's goals? What are the goals or objectives of the company? And try to tie the success of what you've found from it to them finding the same success for those goals. Like your motivation has to change from my goal is to get people to run more tests. My goal is to get people to use the experimentation tool more. It has to change from that to my goal is to help other people achieve their goals more efficiently, faster, with more impact. Because that's essentially what experimentation does. You low cost validation for, before investing deeply, getting more and more ideas and learnings out the door so you can build that institutional memory and make better decisions outside the scale of just running tests. And then the democratization piece, like helping other people just enable themselves to leverage this tool and capitalize on the value it brings.
Yeah, 100%. And just as you're talking to, I think there's like such a cool thing in this where you're like, the people that are really great about like facilitating or enabling this culture of experimentation, I think are like masters at also like the communications and almost like the company relations part of it. And it makes me everything you're saying too, really shifting from that positive sum game type mindset by like you helping them, they help you kind of thing. And that reverse cycle is like such a powerful mindset shift you have to have. I think almost something that maybe like people in our field are not predisposition to, because it's like you're so objective, it's got to be about fact, it's got to be about evidence, but there is like this like sneaky human thing that you've got to solve for and like kind of create like the space for too that
Yeah,
I think exists.
totally.
Amazing, dude. Yeah, I love it. I think that's like also one of those things. It's like so simple, but like when I've seen you write about that, or even like when we have our kind of our chat, I was like, that's so like bang on of like exactly. And I would say all of us probably catch ourselves actually doing it to some degree. I'm sure I've done it like in the last month, probably 2 or 3 times, let alone like it's like I've just made the mistake like once. So yeah, 100%. Okay, juicy one. Obviously, would love to get things, especially someone inside of like the Microsoft ecosystem, although in a very, very, I'd say unique, very cool part of it as well in the space of like Minecraft is perspectives on this whole world and the hype cycle of AI, and particularly how it relates to the practice of building experimentation systems or running experiments. I would love to just tee this up by like just open. It's like where have you started to see, and I think we talked about the idea of where's there impressive impacts, like exciting stuff that you're actually seeing happen, and we'll try to do this in part like 1 versus 2. So maybe we'll start with the optimistic view of this first.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to get some of your perspectives.
Yeah. I mean, even since the last time part one, like my
Yeah,
answer has
totally. Yeah,
changed. Like I've learned new
nice.
things.
Yeah,
So I think I'm just going to go down the product development life cycle and
yeah,
touch
perfect.
on,
Yeah,
okay, this is where AI helps experimentation, research, whatever it is, and so on and so forth. So at the very beginning in the discovery phase, we have a new superpower with AI with the ability to take very large data sets and summarize them very quickly and surprisingly accurately. And so this is kind of like a gold mine for any product team in the discovery stage. I'll give an example of a research project I was just doing this morning. We ran a survey to over 130 people, 7 questions, and it's like 680 total answers. Now, pre AI, I would have to read every answer. I would have to like highlight, make notes, okay, this is like how many times this observation was mentioned. This is how many times this other observation was mentioned. And then I'd have to go count it, accumulate it, summarize it. It would take me like 4 hours, at least, if I was able to sit down for 4 hours straight. So otherwise, it would take days to get to that point. And then you go, okay, now let's come up with recommendations, so on and so forth. The part that AI has helped accelerate is now, instead of me having to go through every single quote, every answer, I can upload that data into Copilot, ChatGPT, and just prompt after prompt ask it to essentially summarize what were the most common answers. And then I'll spot check. I'll make sure it's not giving me any type of hallucinations, any weirdness. I will have the same output of key learnings as I would have if I did it manually in the span of like minutes versus hours. And so it used to take me days to finish a research project. Now I just finished one right before this meeting in like 45 minutes. Like I took the PDF, uploaded it to ChatGPT, had all the survey answers, you know, asked it prompt, pretty much have a conversation with it, right? Like you can pretty much reiterate your research questions after you upload it into the chat window, and it will go through every answer and give you surprisingly accurate responses. This is a huge accelerator for going from data to insight. And you can do this with any type of qualitative data set. It's super important to spot check, to go through, make sure it's not misinterpreting some words as something else. Like with Minecraft, we have the word creeper, which is actually a character in the game, a mob in the game, but AI might interpret that as a bad thing, like creepers are weird people.
Yeah.
Like, and so really important to go through for context. And that's where the conversation part happens, going back and forth, correcting it, making sure it's giving you the most accurate output. And so that is my one of my biggest use cases that I just kind of stumbled upon my own. And that's in the discovery stage. And you could do the same thing with large quantitative data sets too. And it's like if you're doing a deep dive on quantitative data on your current analytics stack, and instead of having to go through so many different variations of metrics or segments, just uploading all the data and then starting to ask the prompts that you would normally reach out to your data scientist to ask or analyst to ask. I mean, I remember at Lucid before, they had such a problem where product teams would reach out to the analytics team with very specific questions like, hey, I want to know for, flowchart users, what is their 7-day retention from their first visit or something like pretty specific, and they would have to go manually create their own SQL queries, find it, figure it out. And today, most tools, and I think it's Amplitude or Mixpanel, I can't remember which one, but their goal is to make that process so much more seamless where you can ask the question and you can get the answer using AI, like through, and again, that takes corrections, it takes spot checking for sure, but it again speeds up the process so fast. And this is where I see most of the value of AI, especially in this discovery phase, where you're not necessarily asking AI for ideas. I think this is where a lot of people will get a little overexcited about it, where they'll recommend, hey, use AI to not only go through the insights, but to give you recommendations on what to test. I think that can be helpful if you're like kind of like having writer's block and you don't know what type of ideas to come out of this, but you're essentially stripping the value you get of all the institutional memory your designers have, your product managers have, your developers have, your leadership has. Because AI, like the most important part of having a good output of AI is context. All of the context that these professionals have of their user, of the product, of past tests, that that creates a much more valuable recommendation engine than AI who has no context usually. that other people also have. And so when you get to the solutioning part, I think a lot of people are easy to jump towards AI, tell me this. Like, tell me the things I should test, tell me the recommendations. But at least from my experience, when I've tested that out, the output of what they provide is just much lower quality than if we just use our own brains, right? Like, than if I just sat down and went through the insights, sat down with the designer, like, came up with some ideas of what to do. I think in the discovery phase, especially when you're kind of like ideating what features should we build, what problems should we solve, it's the true value of AI is the speed to insight. So, kind of like what we mentioned, speed from data set to insights. And then you leverage the team's knowledge to come up with solutions. So, that's the first chunk where I see a lot of value.
Can I ask you, so like just in that like realm too, like you give the creeper example with Minecraft, right? I'm assuming you were doing the in that case you're just leveraging Copilot to do this type of work. Like that's what you're using
Yep.
essentially to go through the survey results. I find it kind of interesting that their context thing, which I 100% agree, but I almost think there's like almost this like sweet spot in the middle too of like how do we give the AI that context in like a very like appropriate way. Have you found any good way to do that in research yet? Of like, hey, this is a survey for Minecraft. Here's some important contextual things to know that you're actually feeding to improve the survey analysis output or really rapidly.
Yeah. So, when we do social listening across all the different social platforms, we have this challenge as well, where context, like people will cuss, and most AI sees cuss as negative, but people are actually saying this is effing awesome, you know? And so I think this comes down to like making sure you have your prompts, some type of templates for your prompts in each use case that you have. To simply upload something and say, summarize this for me, it's not going to give you the value you really need. So, what you recommended is actually the most effective approach. Another way you can do this is create an AI agent for each use case. We talked about this before, how it can get kind of messy, and I agree.
Yeah.
But having a user research AI agent, and you only use that agent for, uploading qualitative data and having them spit out insights. And what you can do is, as you create the agent, it gives you an option to train it. Like, okay, what do you want this agent to do? What criteria or guardrails do you want it to have? What sources do you want it to avoid? And I think that's one of the pieces of beauty of the agent part of these things is that you don't, in that case, you don't have to repeat yourself every single time. You just have to tell the agent one time, "Hey, these are your guardrails. This is the context of which I want you to give me answers. Now let's move," right? So, I think solution 1 to that problem, exactly what you said, every time you put in a prompt, the very first prompt, give that context. Here's my goal, here are some considerations, and here's the data set I need you to go through, something like that. But if you have access to the ability to create AI agents, usually you only have to provide those considerations one time, at least the evergreen ones.
Yeah, yeah. Do you just as you're kind of talking about this thing that makes me think of too is like I've been such a big advocate or like my mindset around say like research or the observation piece that you're kind of describing in your like observation theory and then we come up with like
Yeah.
solutioning is like just so much of the process of like it's like oh we have to do that to really have a grounding and understanding and it's always like good design is understanding so that's part of it but then the challenge is you just don't have enough time to do it or you get like really busy. And so I'm kind of like caught in these like two worlds personally between like that's such like a fundamental muscle that you need to have good understanding balance with speed and time and that constraint and how do you kind of try to remove that constraint without losing the depth of it. And I think as you I always every time I talk to you like oh I just finished this like piece of research or something like that. I'm curious, like, do you have like perspectives on that of like what is still fundamental to do, not just because it takes time, but because it's like it's time like well spent, maybe is like to describe it to like have that understanding and like where are the like really lean in because speed gets introduced here versus like, hey, on the other side, you just got to go through the reps of kind of building up that mental knowledge.
So it's hard to answer that without sounding like condescending in a way, but it's like
It's soapbox time, yeah.
if you come to a decision point or a part of your work stream that requires any type of imagination or product sense or creativity, always start by trying to leverage your own product sense or your team's product sense. Now, I do think it is helpful to leverage AI to build that product sense. I was listening to a recent podcast, I think it's Julie Zoe, who talked about one of the most valuable use cases that she has for her and her team for AI, for ChatGPT, is learning. And it's really one of the biggest resources I use. Like it used to be go to
Yeah.
Google or Bing and then search, find an article, read an article. Maybe this wasn't helpful, go to the next article, so on and so forth. Now with ChatGPT, I can I can learn at a much accelerated pace and I can actually have very strong control over the sources it uses. I can have control over, which particular like subtopics of the topic I want to learn more about. Like a sequel is a great example, right? Like I was doing a sequel course and I was struggling, but I didn't have a coach. And so I pulled up ChatGPT and I started to essentially leverage it as, can you check this? What's wrong? And it would spit out exactly what I needed, and it would be very, scary accurate. So I think the way to answer that question best is it's almost like reverse engineering for where does AI actually provide added value versus what you normally do in your work stream. And so if you're at a point and you're trying to decide AI or, do this myself, spend the time, I would always start with like trying to understand, am I just completing a process, right? Am I just going through formulas, filling out queries or doing something that I would say is more tedious? Or is this a task that requires imagination, product sense, creativity, user context in order to accomplish this particular task? Um, I do think a lot of people will still try to use AI. And I've also realized when I've tried to use AI for things like that in the past, asking for the answer pretty much, I've almost always been underwhelmed. Like, not only do I feel like guilty that I didn't go the effort to do this, but the output of it is like not so great. So hopefully that answers that question.
It does, yeah. I 100% have the similar feeling where like you're excited and then you're like, just I was totally underwhelmed by that, or that wasn't quite right, or like it's not that level of depth that I'm looking for. Maybe just to kind of do the flip side. Well, even I don't go back to like going back to your whole product
Yeah.
development life cycle. Where are other areas that you see like it's valuable, or you get excited, and
Yeah.
I'll maybe sprinkle in like, hey, where are you feeling at the moment? Maybe caution, or like maybe the hype's more than the juice isn't quite worth the squeeze yet.
Yeah. So the next step really design, and I am highly skeptical of leveraging AI to build like full fidelity designs. I think the value of using AI in this build design step, or even like this development early build step, like prototyping. I think the value comes is if you have design constraints and you want to build a prototype really quick. So like Replit, Lovable, whatever AI tool you want to use for that. I think if a PM can go in, they have an idea, they can help visualize the idea, prototype the idea, and present it to the other people as an example, right? Not the end state, but an example of what we could do. That is almost the most like ideal way of getting comprehension of your idea. And I remember when I was at Lucid, one of the VPs of design, like before rapid prototyping, before Lovable was around, like that was his biggest goal almost every time I spoke with him. It's like, how can we prototype faster and better so that we can visualize what we're trying to test out quicker versus like working, like leveraging design, having to go through, build a Figma prototype that actually works as expected. Like that's a big lift. And so I think the value in this next step, it's very much dependent upon your situation. If you have a designer who is able to spend the time to build some type of prototype quickly, they can actually leverage AI too. Like Figma, other design tools, you can give them a style guide, you can give them a set of components, and you can use prompts to build exactly what you're trying to build. I just saw this as an example um, in a meeting for Minecraft we had a few months ago, where a designer was walking us through this process. And again, it's not necessarily making decisions as much as it is speeding up the tedious parts of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that like you still need like the foundations or whatnot, but then all the like little tiny tweaks or whatnot, that all the alignment and that kind of stuff. But it's if the base like kind of components I think are there, it can rapidly speed things up, or the promise seems to. I'm seeing the same types of demos where you're like, wow, that's crazy. But then you think of all the little things that also need to be in place that produce that type of output, and I'm sure it will continue to get better and better.
Yeah.
But any other way? So you talk about design. What about development?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Okay, let's go.
So one more thing on the design side, like you really want to like there's so many nuances of your design on your website or product that leveraging these AI tools, even the ones that are starting to be built into experimentation tools, like, hey, use prompts to build a variation, I think that is a bit dangerous. Because to me, prototypes are more so to demonstrate like a demo versus something you actually put in front of users. It doesn't take into account accessibility, it doesn't take into account constraints of your code base. And so that's something to really be thinking deeply about as an experimentation like platform owner. Maybe that's not the best place to invest, right? Of having your experimentation tool build variations that you're actually going to go put in front of users. I'm sure there's solutions that work, but I've not become aware of those yet. Now, on the development side, I have my list over here of
And just on that
yeah,
note, to double tap into it, really, it's down to just the complexity between, yes, you can quickly vibe code your way to what looks like it, but then to actually hard launch that or being able to put it in practice, that's the concern of just like most tech stacks are hard and complicated. And like, I'll put my hand up and be like, 100% see that.
yeah,
Like, it's like the reality, especially in enterprise experimentation, is you're constantly solving for little nasty, tricky things that need to be caught.
yeah.
But that's kind of the thing is it's like prototyping works great, like we can get somewhere really quick and make something very like live and functional, increase speed, but that gap between it's actually in a good place to hard code and like handle all the bugs or whatnot, like that's sort of like the world of like our we're still living in it. Go ahead though, for the on the development side.
AI for engineering purposes, I will say I have more room to learn there, but I think from an automation perspective, there's tons of opportunities. One thing that a lot of teams struggle with are understanding, what is the sample size? What is the conversion rate? How long I should run this test? They work with their analytics teams to try to answer these questions. So this really goes down to having a prompt or question for a particular page or experience and simply asking, how long do I need to run this test? The opportunity really lives in the speed of which you can answer certain questions like that. Another area where I'm really interested in learning more is leveraging AI ML for predictive modeling of long term metrics. As you know, with experiments, they're very contextualized. They're isolated to a 2 week period out of a 52-week year. And so when we try to help teams understand what's the long term impact of this experiment, today we have to use very napkin math type of approaches to explain to them, okay, well, if we took this number of extra conversions we got during the test period and we just multiply it by the rest of the year, it would be this. But that doesn't account for seasonality. It doesn't account for, you know, campaigns or new movies coming out, things like that have significant influence on your conversion rates. And so this is where I think I'm really interested in learning more to how to leverage this predictive modeling approach where an experimentation metric output could be very much something like an LTV that is telling you, hey, this was your conversion rate for this particular test. If we were to extrapolate that across the next 12 months, this is the actual like 12-month, 1 year annual impact you would see from, could see from this experiment versus having one static projection of this week applied to all weeks, right? It's essentially taking the delta you achieved on that conversion rate and applying it to your seasonal conversion rate changes that it would expect throughout the year. This is something I think would be incredibly beneficial across all verticals of hierarchy, like the team itself. We can actually start to extrapolate actual, like much higher confident expected annual revenue, expected annual impact. If I'm leadership, I can start to really see what are the places where our investments are leading to the long-term outcomes that are really important. Like weekly retention, super important. But the reason people, especially leaders, look at that is because it is a strong leading indicator of long term retention. Not 100% of the time, obviously, but there are other signals that AI ML can help determine to forecast okay, this is actually going to be a long term win in this particular kind of area or parameter. And the other place I think it's been around for a while already is like multi-arm bandit experiments. And that is essentially just using ML. I think this is mostly useful for very top of funnel type of experiments, like paid media, signups, where you're more concerned about driving quality traffic or quality conversions and you have a very low risk area to do it in. It's not like a permanent fixture, right? Of that's happening within the product. I think that's where it gets a little dangerous as you go further down the funnel to use ML type of algorithms. And then the other part of analytics is essentially things like Cupid or other ML driven analysis statistical approaches to essentially reduce the variance as much as possible and increase the confidence of the outcomes you're seeing. AI can do a better job siphoning through metadata of particular users and qualifying or disqualifying them as actually being part of the test. And so I think these are where a lot of the opportunities truly live at the pre and post analytics part of leveraging AI and ML.
I love it. I think I definitely can recognize, I think a lot of the challenges that we currently face with analytics, like everything you're saying of just like that, how do we query quickly in the world of experiments, a whole, is this actually someone we should be counting or not? I think that's a really fascinating one. And I definitely think the one that you said first, though, resonates the most with me in terms of like projections. I have this like personal gripe because I see this and it's like, yeah, we obviously want to try to communicate the value of the work, which oftentimes you get that 12-month extrapolation. But my thing I've always said is like, sure, that works. But then when you get to the end of the year and that's totally way off from any numbers they're seeing, it's actually like sort of short-term win, but long-term poison almost is the feeling I've had where it's actually removing the trust in what we're doing. And so I love the idea of thinking about how can we maybe be a little bit more robust and thinking about seasonality. I love the idea, especially in Minecraft, with maybe a movie's coming out and that's going to affect things, and like we should maybe predict that in a different way. It's not a perfect, like it's again a projection, and it's not perfect, and that's where sometimes I think if I had anything to kind of throw in here, it's like that. Just in general, people should be careful of. I think that's a big one of like. You want to show your work and do that, but I think actually, if you want to bring other people along for the journey, you almost have to show that it's not exact in that case and make everyone comfortable with it and be like, hey, we'll try to project it as best as possible, but maybe not perfectly.
Totally.
Amazing. I saw you did this post where you essentially said, hey, I am just trying to be helpful in the experimentation community, and I'm doing this kind of pilot where I'm giving up some time slots for people that if they wanted to just have a conversation with me or get my point of view or take on advice. And I think you said you were going to do 2 hour long sessions in November and just like opened it up and said, hey, anyone wants to reach out, I'm going to do some of these. I'm curious, like two things. One, like what made you want to do that? Like what was the inspiration for it? And then like how's it going? And anything in particular, there's some cool topics you had all around like prioritizing high impact tests, how to launch a program, how to scale a program, a whole range of topics in there. Probably that's a whole different podcast. Maybe that'll be a part 3 that we eventually get to. But I'm just curious. Yeah, what's led to that?
My manager, Michael Wiegand, who was one of the best managers I've ever had, he told me, Tim, if there's anything you do in your, next steps of your career is to continue to like educate, speak, and help people out. And this really helped me, I think, from a self-awareness perspective, because it was earlier in my career and I'm like, I don't know what my superpower or I don't know where my value really is most appreciated. And since COVID happened, I haven't had a lot of opportunity to really do this. And the thing I loved most about it, and that I do love, is that I actually end up creating a forcing function for myself to learn. Like, I'm not an expert in any of the things I speak about until I decide, okay, I think I want to talk about this. Then I go and I do the due diligence. I test things out at my own job. I'm reading books. I'm always applying what I'm reading, trying to learn myself. And I think that's where I feel the most fulfilled is when I can take the things I've learned, the insights I've gained, the mistakes I've made, the successes I've found, and help others pretty much get a head start and see a shortcut for it. So the reason I put that post out there is to keep myself on my toes on making sure I'm continuously educating myself on these topics and also helping others at the same time. I'm, it is like very cliche to say it's very self-serving, it's selfish. I just like helping other people. I've learned, especially in the past few months, few years, that that's really where I get a lot of my energy. Like, I've already had, I think, 3 conversations from those, and all of them, I felt at the end like I actually learned something, right? Like, I learned of, a gap in my knowledge I realized that I wanted to go fill, or I learned about someone else's challenges and the unique situations they're in. And, it, again, motivates me to go figure out how can I help them solve this problem. When I posted that, I think it was within a few hours that I had filled up all 4 spots of people wanting to reach out and chat. I'm actually like, I'm not going to post this on LinkedIn because I do have a calendar that I have to be conscious of, but of people who reached out after that, I'm like, why not, right? It's like it's half an hour of, whatever week or month. So beyond just the 4 that originally booked right away, I'm still more than happy to talk about experimentation with really anyone who's interested, right? Like whether it's me helping them, whether they have ideas they think they can help me, or just to talk shop. I find those types of conversations are the ones that really serve as the catalyst for me to dive into something else or dig deeper into a part where maybe I think I'm an expert on, but I have more to learn. So that's really the crux of where that came from.
Nice. Well, I loved it. It's very cool. I think getting to tap into people's kind of advice and experience super super valuable. So big shout out to you for creating the space for it and all that. And I'll second it by just saying big shout out for also doing this with us. So thank you very much. If people do want to connect with you, I obviously mentioned LinkedIn, but is there any other way that they can do it, or is LinkedIn just the best to look up Tim Mehta and start chatting with you there?
As of right now, LinkedIn's the best. I keep it pretty simple on LinkedIn right now.
Okay, I love it, man. Okay, well, thank you very much. Hope everyone enjoyed this. Think tons of good stuff in there that I think everyone can be applying inside kind of their role, or if you're looking to start something just from scratch. So thank you so much, Tim. Really appreciated it.
Thank you, Matt.
Cheers.